Not too long ago, a Facebook friend posted a meme about spirituality and religion that I found rather provocative. I commented on the post saying, that needs some unpacking that doesn't fit in a meme. This morning, I'm going to try and do that. Here's what the meme said. Spirituality does not come from religion. It comes from our souls. We must stop confusing religion and spirituality. Religion is a set of rules, regulations, and rituals created by humans, which were supposed to help people spiritually. Due to human imperfection, religion has become corrupt, political, divisive, and a tool for power struggles. Spirituality is not theology or ideology. It is simply a way of life, pure and original as given by the divine. Spirituality is a network linking us to the divine, the universe, and each other. As I wrote, that needs some unpacking that doesn't fit in a meme. Now, I've been thinking about the subject of spirituality and religion for some time, since becoming a Unitarian Universalist. Many UUs would say that we're not a religion, and even spirituality is an iffy concept for our more humanist UUs. And in today's society, thanks to the many public religious voices that are racist, sexist, and homophobic, well, who'd want to be part of a religion like that? No wonder the fastest growing demographic, particularly amongst younger generations, are those who, when asked their religion, answer none. So back when I was taking a seminary class called Ministry in Daily Life, I tried to express as a Unitarian Universalist how I had experienced spirituality and religion and what that meant for ministry. I wrote the following. Imagine a tree, an ancient oak that has borne witness to the passage of centuries. Its roots are sunk deep into the fertile soil, and in the folds and crevices of its trunk, it provides shelter for countless smaller creatures. Its limbs stretch toward the sky so that its leaves may better drink of the sunlight that shines upon it. How much is spirituality like that oak tree? I asked. Growing forth from the eternal mystery of being, spirituality expresses our yearnings toward transcendence, all the while nourished by the divine. Spirituality does not demand recognition for what it does, but quietly encourages wonder, reverence, gratitude, creativity, and imagination. In my ministry, I wrote, may I carefully and diligently tend the tree of spirituality. May I fertilize it and water it, yet also pruning it as necessary. May I beware the dangers of religion that is as mistletoe, sucking the life out of the tree on which it grows as a parasite. Rather, let me cultivate a religious life that becomes some part of a splendid garden in which magnificent trees of spirituality may flourish. As I'm sure you can imagine, the Reverend Lillian Daniels' reflection, which was actually entitled Spiritual but Not Religious, Please Stop Boring Me, caused quite a stir. I know it generated much discussion amongst Unitarian Universalist ministers, some thanking Daniel for expressing their frustrations, others chastising her for chasing away potential congregants, some agreeing with her defense of religion, others criticizing her attack on spirituality. Of course, I'm pretty sure Daniel wrote her reflection as, let's say, sarcastically as she did, at least partly in the hope that it would lead to such discussion, because it was and still is a subject that deserves attention. After all, in our society, it does seem like spirituality and religion have been set up in opposition to one another. Either you're spiritual but not religious, or you're religious but not spiritual. This certainly seems to be the opinion of whoever wrote that meme I mentioned earlier. According to them, religion was supposed to help people spiritually, But because people are imperfect, religion has become a tool that is the opposite of spirituality. And given a choice, we should choose spirituality, not religion. But as the Reverend Lillian Daniel explains when it comes to her predictable conversations with other airplane passengers, everybody loves to tell a minister what's wrong with the church. And it's usually some church that bears no relation to the one I serve. Certainly, any group of people has its flaws because, yes, people are imperfect. And in these days of low civic engagement, to the point that the United States Surgeon General considers social isolation to be a public health crisis, most of the groups of people that still exist are churches and other religious communities. And while there are certainly stories of congregations going horribly wrong, most of them, in my experience, are doing their best to feed people's spirits. So I agree with the author of the meme that spirituality does not come from religion, but I disagree with them that religion is merely a set of rules, regulations, and rituals. Unitarian Universalism certainly is not. I disagree with Lillian Daniel that personal spiritual experiences don't matter, but I agree with her that it's in religious community that spiritual work really bears fruit. Part of the problem, I think, is that there's no such singular thing as spirituality, no such singular thing as religion. There are spiritualities and there are religions. If you reduce each of them to a straw man, if you create mere caricatures such that one is by definition superior to the other, then not surprisingly, the straw man argument will come to the fallacious conclusion that spirituality is better than religion or vice versa. For me, spirituality is personal and religion is communal. You can have spirituality by yourself, but you cannot have religion by yourself. At their best, they work together, mutually supporting each other. The individual spiritualities of the people in a community bring life to their shared religion. And in turn, the community's religion nourishes each person's spirituality. Unitarian Universalists knew this 40 years ago when they made it part of our UUA covenant to affirm and promote acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. Of course, since they're both human endeavors, spirituality and religion can also be bad. Rather than spirituality being like a magnificent tree reaching into the sky, providing shade and shelter, it could be like a thicket of brambles taking over the ground, selfish and toxic, trapping other plants and choking them out. And rather than religion being like a splendid garden where trees are cultivated and carefully tended, it could be like mistletoe that grows as a parasite, stunting the trees and even killing them. Or worse, religion could be like someone who cuts down the trees for profit and leaves nothing but stumps behind. The quality of our personal spirituality is up to each of us individually, and the quality of our shared religion is up to us as a community. They are not dictated to us. They are not chosen for us. We have the agency to decide what they will be. Each of us gets to choose a spiritual practice that is meaningful to each of us. A little later, we'll talk about some of the many possibilities. And together, we get to decide how to practice our religion as a community, just as we created our own covenant for our congregation. So yes, I agree with the author of the meme. Spirituality is about connecting with the divine, the universe, and for me, those are the same, and each other. And yes, I agree with Lillian Daniel that religious community is where living our spirituality is most powerful for each of us and for our wider society that is starving for human connection. I'm going to ask you some wondering questions now, and I'll give you a little time after each to reflect. Lynn will put each question on the screen as I ask it. I wonder how you understand what it means to be in right relationship with one another and with the world around us. I wonder how your own spirituality encourages wonder, reverence, gratitude, creativity, and imagination. I wonder how our congregation encourages you or could encourage you in your spiritual growth. I wonder what spiritual practice you have found or could find that is meaningful to you. One of the programs we've been trying out over the last year or so is called Faith Forward. Developed by First Unitarian in Dallas, it's a series of courses and workshops on Unitarian, Universalist history and traditions and practices that help somebody move from being a visitor in the congregation to being a leader. Many of you have been through the Inquirers and Beyond Inquirers courses, for instance, as well as the Roots workshop. A course that we haven't tried out yet is called Spiritual Practices, though I will be offering a version of the first session or two at our UUFP retreat on Saturday. Now, as I was preparing for today's service, a paragraph in the facilitator guide for that course jumped out at me. It reads, "What is the difference between spiritual experiences and spiritual practices? Gardening, running, dancing, a long conversation with a cherished friend, these things are certainly spiritual endeavors that can enrich our soul. However, when we speak of spiritual practice, we are referring to specific disciplines practiced with regularity for the purpose of deepening our connection with self and the sacred." I think this is part of what the Reverend Lillian Daniel was getting at. Sunsets, walks on the beach, hikes up to hilltops, these can certainly be spiritual experiences. I know they have been for me, but I wouldn't claim that they were part of any spiritual practice I was doing at the time. So what makes something a spiritual practice? According to my elder colleague, the Reverend Scott Alexander, editor of the Skinner House book, Everyday Spiritual Practice, it's any attitude or activity in which you can regularly and intentionally engage, and which significantly deepens the quality of your relationships with the miracle of life both within and beyond you. So catching a particularly beautiful sunset because you happen to be in the right place at the right time, that may well be a spiritual experience, but it's not a spiritual practice just by itself. But if you make it a point every day to go to a place where you can watch the sunset, and you take that time to marvel at, for example, the physics the chemistry, and the biology that makes it possible for you to appreciate such an everyday miracle, then you have brought intentionality, regularity, and depth to it as a spiritual practice. And if you bring intentionality, regularity, and depth to gardening, running, dancing, long conversations with cherished friends, or any everyday activity, then yes, they can be spiritual practices too. We're going to pass around a handout showing what's been called the tree of spiritual practices. I'll also post a link to this in the chat for those of you on Zoom. Developed by the Center for Contemplative Mind in Society, this shows a variety of spiritual practices arranged in categories such as movement, creativity, activism, and stillness. All of them involve intentionality, regularity, and depth. Of course, this isn't an exclusive list of possible spiritual practices. Gardening is not on here, though I would argue that finding gods in sunsets is a form of what's called beholding, which is on here. Once you all have a copy of the handout, I invite you to take a couple of minutes to study it. Lynn, please put it on the screen too. Perhaps one of these is your spiritual practice already. Or perhaps you have a spiritual practice that isn't named here. Maybe there's something on this tree of spiritual practices that you would like to try, to see if it's meaningful to you. Please take a couple of minutes to reflect on this, and then Gail will invite us into a time of sharing. Scott Alexander describes a spiritual practice, the practice of spirituality, as requiring intentionality, regularity, and depth. I would add a fourth characteristic that, while not a requirement, nonetheless makes a big difference, and that is community. If we are practicing our spirituality with other people who are also practicing their spirituality, even if they're doing something else, it helps us to bring intentionality, regularity, and depth to what we're doing. For example, I've been part of voluntary simplicity study circles in a couple of UU congregations, and it really helped to be part of a group rather than doing it by myself. It's not shown on the tree, but there is a chapter in Everyday Spiritual Practice on simple living. At the end of each of our regular meetings, based on whatever aspect of spirituality we'd been studying, we would make a note in our journals about something we intended to do before the next meeting, and we would share our intentions with one another. And then at the next meeting, we'd revisit those intentions and share how they had gone. It was a good way to be accountable, helping us to deepen our engagement with this spiritual practice. So while you can certainly do it by yourself, there are benefits to practicing your spirituality, as we've heard, as part of a community. Other people in such a community can support you, they can disagree with you, they can hold you accountable, they can help you figure out a problem, they can call you out on your nonsense, and they can love you. What's more, you can do the same for them. This is religion, not religion hijacked by people seeking power or wealth, but healthy religion. And it's why I think of religion as like an arborist, a caretaker of trees, someone who, with skill and expertise, will carefully and diligently tend trees of spirituality so that they may grow and flourish and be a joy to behold. May this religious community be such a loving arborist for all of our magnificent trees of spirituality.